Hello and welcome to another Final Word Daily, and it's me, Daniel Norcross again. I'm very sorry for you to have to endure, but I'm very, very pleased to say that more than making up for my malign presence is Isabel Westbury. Isabel Westbury, you're back.
Hello, good evening. Wow, I feel unduly flustered after that England performance, but I think it was one that they needed.
I think it is. We're going to go through the bones of that very briefly before we do. Are you wearing a Wimbledon Football Club FA Cup winning shirt from 1988?
Daniel, of course, your eyes need testing. I felt as though I have a GB cushion in the background, so I needed some balance. I mean, we're not the BBC, but I am wearing a Sri Lanka top. It's a very nice top.
Oh, right.
So I thought, we are an impartial journalist, observers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we are exactly that. And sorry, I could only see your shoulders. So, we're going to do what we always do in the final word. One of us is going to try and sum up this game in 30 seconds. And today, Westers, it is going to be you starting now.
For the first time this tournament, England lost 3 wickets in the power play, largely at the hands of Hasaranga, and things looked dicey as Eoin Morgan joined Jos Buttler at the crease. Both struggled early, but not for long, as Buttler was both ridiculous and sublime, moving, meandering and mastering his way to a maiden international T20 century. England had 163 on the board, and soon they too had 3 wickets in a power play. Plain sailing? Not at all, as Hasaranga, that man again, spearheaded a middle order rally, and suddenly Sri Lanka had England under pressure. But that is where this England thrives. Run-outs, catches and Yorkers, and England now have that much coveted win, which they really had to work hard for.
Do you know, that is fantastic, and it was only about 36 seconds, and there was a lot to cover today.
Close.
No, it's good. It's really, really good. So where do we begin? I guess we've got to start with Jos Buttler, because that's where we kind of left off the last England game. It was Jos Buttler going berserk, 71 from 31, unbeaten. He now has an average in excess of 60 opening the batting in T20 internationals at a strike rate just a tick below 150. These numbers are preposterous, quite frankly. Today, was there a fear that England were actually doing what we've lambasted India for doing and Australia for doing and other sides, well, most notably those two in this tournament? England at 47 for 3, was it? At the 10 over stage, looked like they were falling into exactly the same trap. But Jos Buttler, he had power to spare at the back end of that innings and transformed it into a perfectly defendable 163.
So the devil in me wants to think that England did that deliberately, because I was quite concerned after the last couple of wins that England are absolutely cruising the group stages, and as this is kind of the comedy tournament as far as I'm concerned with current results, what was going to happen obviously was that England were going to absolutely cruise the group stages and then get knocked out in the first knockout match. So this was that they needed to kind of manufacture a situation in which they really had to work hard for it. And we know that the 3 wickets in a power play stat is one of those kind of things that go down in history, is if you get 3 wickets in a power play, you're kind of, that's it, you're done.
Except when both sides lose 3 wickets in the power play, of course, in which case it's very hard to know what's going to happen.
And that's what happened here. So they evened it out nicely, they challenged themselves, they gave Eoin Morgan a nice little hit in the middle, especially as he started quite slowly. I think he was 9 from 20 balls as well. And they kind of gave every scenario that they needed testing and still came out as winners. So perfect in many, many ways.
Well, it was perfect, but for England, from an England point of view, but it was perfect because Jos Buttler produced an innings for the ages, didn't he? He had, was it 17 off 20, something on that score? Ended up with 101 from 67, 6 4s, 6 6s. If he gets out, if he gets a little feather on something, when the score's on 90 odd, did England have a way back? We saw when Moeen Ali came in, he wasn't able to time it immediately, he only faced a couple of balls, but it didn't feel like it was going to be somewhere that was sort of pitch and the sort of conditions in which someone was able to come in and do that. And indeed, in Sri Lanka's reply, they were ahead of England's rate pretty much throughout until the very, very end, which says to me that England were hanging quite precariously in this game and relied on one of their great T20 international innings. Buttler's first, of course, in T20 internationals. He became, can I just tell you very quickly, only the second English player to score 100 in all 3 formats. And the other, of
and
course,
the first men's player, therefore, wasn't he?
That's correct.
Because I saw a cheeky tweet from Heather Knight saying, "Welcome to the 3 formats 100 club," which only she can do.
Well, yeah, and now Jos Buttler's there. But yes, talk to that point. England put themselves under a lot of pressure by playing the sort of way that Australia and India have been playing the last couple of days. Should they, and should Morgan have gone harder, and Buttler, earlier?
I feel as there's a lot of hypotheticals in that. In that, Morgan might have fallen, Buttler might have fallen, and it's also presuming that the batters to come in Livingstone, Woakes and Jordan wouldn't have been able to do the business as well at some stage. I mean, this is what is quite extraordinary, is that Liam Livingstone was absolutely selected in their side because he has also been in a ridiculous run of form with the bat, and yet he is featuring at the moment with the ball. So I kind of feel that, yes, they were in precarious positions, yes, there was pressure, but I mean, what cricket match is there not pressure? And I like that myself because England weren't under pressure in any of the matches before, and this was the first one where you had a little bit of an unknown, a little bit of this looks quite difficult, they haven't quite gone to plan. But in the end, it was quite an easy win. 26 runs. It was,
we'll come to how it was easy and whether it was easy shortly. I want to finish off on Buttler because you've not quite addressed his monstrous and absurd six-hitting prowess at just exactly the right time. It was sort of a continuation from the Australia game, but in the Australia game he had the advantage of the conditions in which the ball was a little bit slippier and the pitch was a little bit more rapid. Today he played himself in, he gave himself that time, but then didn't make the error of getting out, and that sort of shows you the sort of ceiling that Buttler can reach, doesn't it, with a white ball? It's just insane.
It's his ability. We talk about adapting. I mean, obviously he can adapt to all 3 formats because he's done that now in his century making. But also the conditions, the partners at the crease, the bowling that he was facing as well. I mean, Hasaranga bowled extremely well, as he did in the previous game. I mean, he was bamboozling many of the England batters. And Buttler just has all those components, the kind of that head on his shoulders, the leadership, so softly spoken as well. I mean, which I always find such an anomaly. But the thing that really marks him out for me is his technique is unique. His wrists are ridiculous. He rolls his wrists over his bat, which means that he can reach balls that should be kind of back of a length and hard to get underneath, but always makes it safe. And it was interesting watching Twitter go on as this unfolded, is that a lot of people kind of saying, this should be in the handbook, and young kids should be playing the way, be taught to play the way Buttler does. But I don't think that's the case, because I don't think anyone can do what Buttler does apart from Buttler. It's a bit like Steve Smith as well, is that you can teach them to a degree in terms of their approach and their mentality, and you can get strength up and power hitting, but the technique is, I've never seen it on any other batter before. It almost reminds me of like a hockey player. I was
going to say, it's like a combination of hockey, shinty and tennis. There's like it's essentially hands, it's rackets, it's using the bat more like a racket, isn't it, than like a cricket bat, and that allows him to access areas that you wouldn't imagine. Just on this, I remember a friend of mine who's a cricket coach had went to watch the England players in the nets, and they saw Jos Buttler, and he was practicing hitting the same ball in a full 360, so he could genuinely be a 360. And this guy said, well, this is just ludicrous. Most people at least give themselves areas in which to hit certain types of balls. Buttler wants to have access to the entire 360 degrees, and I suppose because he has those wrists, the ability to... We didn't see quite so many ramps today. There were 1 or 2, but it probably wasn't perhaps a pitch for it. But that's really what makes him unique, isn't it?
Yeah, and in which case, my advice, I guess, to young kids coming through, anyone that wants to kind of emulate Jos Buttler, I mean, first of all, you just have to have this ridiculous talent, which, I mean, not many people have. But I'd almost say it's a kind of the Elise Perry school method of coaching, is that play different sports. Play loads of different sports when you're younger. Become an all-round athlete. Get that strength, whether it's like hockey or football, or a match awareness and just that sporting kind of, that joy of sport. and then only later, I guess, come into cricket. He just feels like this is an athlete performing on a cricket pitch as opposed to a cricketer performing a sport. I don't think that really makes sense.
Multi-sports, it's worked for one of England's great heroes, all-round athletes, and probably dangerous fascist CB Fry in the past. If you can avoid that part of it, but stick to the actual athleticism, go for it, kids. It's a good idea. Right, we're going to move into the Sri Lanka innings now. Hasaranga, to me, it was all about Hasaranga. Sri Lanka got off to, I thought, it was a positive start, but they were losing those wickets in the power play. Morgan again showing flexibility. Different setups this time, only the one over for Wokes because it went for a few. We saw 2 from Jordan, 2 from Moeen Ali, 2 from Adil Rashid, all about the matchups. England taking wickets very regularly. Sri Lanka fell out of the game until that fantastic, 6th wicket partnership, and it was Hasaranga to the 4 again, 34 off 21, and just before he got out, I felt that was Sri Lanka's game. Had that ball gone another yard and they got 6 for it, then the rate would have been under 9s with 2 established batters, and England in all sorts of trouble because Tim Mills, we should tell you, had to pull out with a quad injury halfway through his second over, which meant that Morgan had to bowl spin at a time he didn't want to. The dew was really falling, the ball was palpably wet, you could see it being dried by numerous towels. It was a real issue for Morgan. He opted for Wokes in the end to bowl those 3 balls. Wokes got out of the over, then Hasaranga got out, and from then it was a procession because Sri Lanka frankly don't have the tail. But some thoughts on Hasaranga, because on another day he was man of the match for me in that game, because look, he picked up, what did he pick up with a ball? It was 3 for 21 in 4 and then 34 off 21. It was incredible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was 2 all-round performances really that defined this day's play, because also Buttler was involved with a lovely run-out right towards the end to kind of precipitate that collapse of wickets. But, I mean, Hasaranga, he's somebody that, like Livingston, he's performing a role that he's not supposed to be performing. In the past, Sri Lanka have had issues with their middle order, but it's their middle order that almost saved the day this time, and it was this clean striking as well that was gorgeous to watch. And I say with a hint of glee that this was around the time that you texted me, Dan. Was it 15 overs? I think 15 overs in, and they were up with the run rate. You had Hasaranga in, Shanaka playing again. It was the 2 captains that were playing the partners, the sort of second fiddles to somebody else that was hitting the ball back over the bowler's head, and they were on course. And you kind of thought, oh gosh, this upsets all of the mathematical projections of the table, etc. Sri Lanka back in the running after their narrow defeat to South Africa. Now again, it being the banana skin. Remember they beat England in the 2019. 50 over World Cup in the group stages as well, and yeah, they were definitely on course. But it was their tail. It was always their tail that was going to be the problem, and it's much weaker than England's. And again, England, this seems to be a team that does thrive under pressure. So in a way, it's a shame, because it would have made things really interesting. I mean, England pretty much now have qualified, haven't they, for the next stage? Yeah,
they have. I'm going to talk you through all the permutations. Just going to wrap up on this game. So an England victory by 26 runs, I think it was in the end, which is a lot more comfortable sounding than it actually was. Those last 5 wickets went in a rapid bundle for 8 runs in next to no time. Terrific bowling from Chris Jordan actually throughout, who finished with the more than reasonable figures of 2 for 24 in 4 overs. England will be concerned about Mills pulling up with a quad injury, but they'll hope that Mark Wood could maybe come back in for that if Mills is unavailable for the next game. 2 for
Mills
19.
Also, just to add, he's not bowled particularly well the last couple of games.
Well, the last couple of games, yeah. And so, and there was talk about maybe bringing Wood in anyway. Just to wrap up, Rashid 2 for 19. He bowled superbly again, and they put him on. They said they put him on right at the beginning because they wanted him to have the best chance with the driest ball. He was hugely effective picking up wickets in the power play once more. So England are winners, and they will almost certainly progress. I'm going to talk you through those group permutations shortly, but before we do, some words for our sponsors, Woodstock Cricket. woodstockcricket.co.uk, and what a fantastic company they are. These are the people that make you personalised gear, personalised bats. I was on a podcast yesterday with the Cricket Pod, And a couple of their boys, they've got some Woodstock bats. It has transformed one of them's average from 30 to 56. That is a 90% increase in batting average in one season. And I've never seen a man walking on air with such glee. And he talked about the wonderful personal service he'd got. He'd never had a bat like it. He didn't realise that a bat of that weight could give him the performance that he wanted. Woodstockcricket.co.uk. If you want to buy some stuff from them, quote the code TFW20 and you will get a discount. Now then, it's time, as we always have on the final word, for our DRF Shell Classic Honda Jazz Dingo Super Number One Catch Moment. Brilliant worldie of the day. It can be anything that's taken your eye. Isabel Westbury, what is it from today's game?
Oh, it's that man Hasaranga again. I mean, we could go easily and go to Buttler and any of his sixes, but Hasaranga, there was a point where he hit, I think it was just before Mills pulled up, he hit Mills back over his head after he just bowled a 90-mile-an-hour delivery for six, and it was the cleanest strike, the most beautiful position, stand and deliver, and you kind of think that is the height of cricket excellence.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. It was an absolutely spectacular shot. For me, it was a moment that brought tears to my eyes for the second time in 24 hours. It was Jos Buttler's six off the last ball of the innings to take him to that 100, that elusive 100, because regular watchers of The Final Word and followers of my Twitter will know that I have a bit of a thing for Jos Buttler, and that was it. I fell apart, but it reminded me...
What was the other thing that
brought
tears to your eyes, though?
Well, the other thing is yesterday lunchtime I had a giant scallop and lobster raviolo swimming in a rich bisque, and I have been given the task of trying to sum that up in 30 seconds. So here is my lobster and scallop raviolo in a rich bisque from yesterday. Chez Bruce, lovely restaurant, Bellevue Road, if anybody's listening, in 30 seconds starting now. Rich, fat and plump, the insides with the sheer juiciness of the lobster, but somehow the glazed perfection of the scallop just burst into the mouth, surrounded by a creamy and silky orange bisque with tiny flecks of herb. The mouth creates a sensation of wonder as its taste buds interact with this thing of tremendous beauty, all served in a really outsized bowl that ensured the bisque remained at just the perfect temperature for the really quite short amount of time it takes to consume such a lovely and wondrous thing.
I'm not going to lie. I think that was longer than my summary.
It probably was. Right, I'm going to get on to group permutations because we haven't got long left. You talked about that might be Sri Lanka being toast. Well, I can tell fans of every team in this group that they are still in it, and I'll tell you how. So, if Australia lose to Bangladesh and the West Indies, if South Africa lose to England and to Bangladesh, if Sri Lanka beat the West Indies and they've only got one game left, then 5 teams will end up on 4 points, and it will come down to net run rate, which will be absolutely fascinating. I've got a solution to net run rate, by the way, which is that at the end of every innings, if you win inside 15 overs, you just keep batting, and then you end up with a net runs for and against. Wouldn't that be fun? We'd then get full 20 overs. England would have had to keep batting against the West Indies and against Australia. They'll never do it, but it would be great. Oops. Sorry, folks. My camera's just fallen off. But wouldn't that be marvellous? It'd be marvellous for the game.
Far too animated about run rate.
I was far too animated about run rate. But what this does mean is that England are essentially through. I think sides have to score 400 and win by 380 runs, that kind of thing. Because England have now won 4 games out of 4 and have a massive net run rate. Of course, it's possible that Australia and South Africa could join them on that number of points by winning both their games, but the chances of both those sides overtaking England's net run rate are basically nil. So we've got a bun fight to come in this group still. Every game it could go right down to the wire. Isabel Westbury, very briefly, your pick to follow England into the quarterfinals?
Oh, South Africa, because I want them to win a World Cup.
Ooh, okay. Controversial opinion there from Isabel Westbury. For my money, I really don't know. South Africa best placed. Australia might sneak through. They often do. Until next time, there'll be more Final Word tomorrow. I believe Adam Collins is back. You'll be delighted to know from having spoken or seen Julia Gillard. But from Isabel Westbury and from myself, it's a very fond farewell.